In 1859, the United States and the British Empire, two of the most powerful nations on planet Earth, came within a hair's breadth of an all-out shooting war. We're talking warships, cannons, thousands of troops, generals screaming orders, and the thing that nearly kicked off this transatlantic bloodbath? A pig. One pig. A single, hungry, potato-loving pig that wandered into the wrong garden on the wrong morning. And here's the best part. By the end of this 13-year standoff, the only casualty of the entire war was the pig. That's it. The pig lost. Everybody else just stood around awkwardly for over a decade. Buckle up, because this is the dumbest war in history, and I mean that as the highest possible compliment. So let's set the scene. It's the 1840s, and America and Britain are squabbling over the Pacific Northwest, that gorgeous, foggy chunk of land up near modern-day Washington State in Canada. To sort it out, both sides signed the Oregon Treaty of 1846, which drew a nice, clean border along the 49th parallel and then supposedly straight down the middle of the channel. Simple, right? Wrong. Because whoever wrote that treaty apparently never looked at a map. There were two channels. Two. And smack in the middle of them sat a little chunk of paradise called San Juan Island. So both nations looked at this island, pointed, and went, "That's mine." Classic. Now, instead of, sorting this out like adults, both countries just let their citizens move in. On one side, you had scrappy American settlers. On the other, the Hudson's Bay Company, a massive British fur trading corporation that basically ran a sheep ranch on the island and considered the whole place their backyard. Two groups of people sharing an island, both convinced they owned it, both quietly seething. What could possibly go wrong? Enter our hero, an American farmer named Lyman Cutler. Lyman had a modest little plot on the island where he grew potatoes. He was living the dream. Peaceful, quiet. Just a man and his spuds. Until one fateful morning, June 15th, 1859, Lyman walks outside and finds a large black pig happily rooting through his garden, munching his precious potatoes like an all-you-can-eat buffet. This wasn't the first time either. This pig was a repeat offender, a serial potato thief, and Lyman had had it. So he grabbed his rifle, took aim, and one shot. The pig was no more. And honestly, fair. But here's the twist. That pig belonged to an Irishman named Charles Griffin, who worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, and Griffin was not happy. Now, Lyman, being a reasonable guy, went to apologize and offered Griffin $10 for his troubles. $10 for a pig. In 1859, that's more than fair. But Griffin looked him dead in the eye and demanded $100. $100 for a pig. Lyman was stunned. He said, "Your pig was eating my potatoes." And Griffin, and I cannot stress how petty this is, allegedly replied, "It's up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig." Sir, that's not how potatoes work. That's not how pigs work. That's not how anything works. So, the pig dispute could have ended there. A funny little disagreement between neighbors, but no. Because British authorities heard about it and threatened to arrest Lyman Cutler and haul him off to trial. The Americans on the island completely lost it. You're going to arrest an American on American soil over a pig? They fired off a panicked plea for military protection, and that plea landed on the desk of exactly the wrong man, Brigadier General William S. Harney. Harney was famous for two things: hating the British with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns, and making impulsively terrible decisions. So when Harney heard British troops threatening Americans, he didn't think, let me de-escalate this pig situation. No, he sent in the troops. Specifically, he dispatched Captain George Pickett. Yes, that Pickett. The guy who'd later become infamous for leading a doomed charge at Gettysburg, along with 66 soldiers to occupy the island. Pickett marched in, planted the American flag, and reportedly declared he'd make the island an American graveyard if the British pushed back. Over a pig, George. Over a pig. The British were like, "Oh, it's like that? Cool." and they responded by sending 3 warships bristling with cannons. Then more. At the peak of this absolute circus, the British had 5 warships, over 2,000 men, and around 70 guns pointed at San Juan Island, all to face off against a couple hundred Americans and a handful of cannons, all of it, because of a dead pig. The British governor, James Douglas, ordered the Royal Navy to land Marines and physically boot the Americans off the island, and the man he ordered to do it was Rear Admiral Robert Baines. And Baines, bless this beautiful, sensible man, flat out refused. He looked at the situation, looked at the pig-shaped cause of it all, and essentially said he would not involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. Legend. Absolute legend. Give this man a statue. While generals and captains were busy waving their swords and puffing out their chests, one guy in the entire chain of command had the emotional maturity of a functioning adult, and thank goodness he did, because the 2 sides spent weeks just glaring at each other across the water, cannons loaded, waiting for literally anyone to twitch. When word of this madness finally reached Washington and London, both governments had the exact same reaction. We're doing what? Over a what? They were horrified. President James Buchanan immediately sent the highest-ranking general in the U.S. Army, the legendary Winfield Scott, all the way across the country to defuse the situation before somebody sneezed and started World War Zero. Cooler heads finally prevailed, and both sides agreed to a compromise so hilariously anticlimactic it's almost poetic. Joint military occupation. That's right. Instead of fighting, the Americans and the British just both stayed. They set up an American camp on one end of the island and an English camp on the other, and they settled in for the long haul. And how long was the haul? 13 years. Over a decade of 2 rival armies sharing one tiny island. But here's the kicker. With no war to fight and nothing to do, the soldiers got bored. So they started hanging out. They visited each other's camps, they threw parties, they held athletic competitions and shared holiday dinners, and reportedly drank together constantly. The most dangerous thing on that island for 13 years was the hangovers. Finally, in 1872, both nations agreed to let a neutral third party settle the border once and for all. And who did they pick? Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany. That's right. The British-American pig dispute was ultimately resolved by a German emperor who reviewed the case and awarded the entire island to the United States. The British packed up, sailed home, and the Great Pig War was officially over. So let's recap. A hungry pig ate some potatoes. A farmer shot it. A guy demanded $100, and that nearly triggered a war between 2 global superpowers, summoned thousands of troops, dozens of warships, a future Confederate general, and eventually a German emperor, all before ending in a 13-year sleepover where everyone just got drunk and became friends. The only living thing that died was the pig. History's bloodiest conflict casualty count, 1 pig. Chef's kiss. Humanity, ladies and gentlemen, never change. If you enjoyed watching 2 empires nearly annihilate each other over breakfast bacon, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button for more gloriously stupid history right here on Sticky Storm. Because trust me, the human race has done way dumber things than this, and we've got all of them. See you in the next one.